Chapter 9 looks at some basic oligopoly models. So there's 3 learning objectives. I think I deleted one of them. So first we'll try to get an understanding of how strategic interaction shapes management decisions in an oligopolistic market structure. And then we'll look at the Cournot, Stackelberg, and Bertrand oligopolistic market structures, and the quantity and pricing decisions in each of those, and then the effect of those decisions on industry profits. And what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the Bertrand oligopoly in the context of Chapter 10, when we talk about game theory. Okay, so I will go through Chapter 9, focus on Cournot, Stackelberg, and a collusive market structure when duopolists collude or oligopolists collude. We'll talk about contestable markets, and then we'll move into Chapter 10, and that's where we'll pick up on the Bertrand oligopoly. Okay, so some basic characteristics of an oligopolistic market structure. Okay, they're characterized by just a few firms. And typically, an industry that has anywhere between 2 and 10 firms is considered an oligopoly. Products can be identical, or there can be product differentiation. Okay, if an oligopoly market has just 2 firms, that's called a duopoly. And you'll see we will simplify our discussion when we look at reaction functions and other technical aspects of an oligopoly. We'll just think about a duopoly because that makes life simple. But the conclusions from a duopoly analysis can be extended to oligopolistic markets with more than 2 firms, but it requires more analysis. We'd have to go from 2-dimensional graphical analysis and simple equations to more complex equations. Okay, and some good news: oligopoly settings tend to be the most difficult to manage. It's really not good news for a manager. Okay, since the manager, you've got to consider if you do something, what your rivals or how your rivals are going to react to that. Okay, and those decisions could be things such as pricing and advertising, product quality, and a number of other things. Okay, but in this chapter, we will focus our attention on mostly pricing decisions, but we'll also talk about how advertising can be analyzed in an oligopoly as well. So here's a brief summary of the different types of oligopolistic models that you see in Chapter 9 of the Bay and Prince textbook. So the Sweezy model is probably the first theory of an oligopolistic market structure, and it's based on what is called the kinked demand curve. And that's because rivals will match price decreases, but not price increases. And this kinked demand curve can be used to explain sticky prices, which was an observation that some economists made, named Sweezy, made back in the old days. And probably some economists made that observation before that, and Sweezy came up with a solution, a graphical solution to that problem. Well, the Sweezy model has been criticized as being not realistic and not explaining where the initial prices come from, where the kink is in the demand curve. So It occupies about 2 pages in the textbook, and we're just not going to cover it. The Cournot model is, I think of it as oligopolistic firms who are passive rivals. They more or less will share the market. Okay, there's things that Cournot oligopolists can do. They can try to innovate and cut cost and gain an advantage. But in general, and at least in our formulation of how this works, Cournot oligopolies just share the market. Okay, and the cost cutting is one thing that can lead to a Stackelberg oligopoly. And that's where you have a market leader. So imagine you've got Cournot oligopolies competing with each other or not competing with each other really. And all of a sudden one innovates, comes up with a big cost advantage and grabs market share. Okay, and they become the price leader. And then all the other competitors become the followers. Or it could just be the Stackelberg market leader is bigger than its rivals. Okay, and we'll see how that works. When we move into chapter 10, we'll talk about Bertrand oligopolies, where there is intense price competition over a homogeneous product. And then with contestable markets, we'll think about the implications of free entry into an oligopolistic market. Okay, the rest of these oligopolistic market structures, we mostly think of them as having barriers to entry. But sometimes a market with only a few firms will have a characteristic of free entry.